Welcome to the 12 Days of Edition Wars. In this year's series, we will be taking a deep dive into the iconic monsters of D&D. On the 10th day of Edition Wars, my DM gave to me a Leucrotta mimicking everything I said. Mimicking everything I said. So with me tonight is my always excellent co-host, Sam Dillon. How are you, Sam?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. And Sam agreed to put Leucrotta on our list because it's one of my wife's favorite monsters. It's not the only one of her favorite monsters that made the cut, but this is just me trying to get my wife to listen to the show.
Oh, not to make her happy, just to get her to listen to it. I see. Because I was going to say happy wife, happy life, but
Look, I believe in that. That's a way of life for me. I'm for it.
All right. Well, so let's talk about it then. The Leucrotta is fascinating. So normally I would start out and I would tell you, okay, in original edition, here is where it is. It's either in one of the little three brown books or it's in one of the four supplemental books. We've seen that happen in this series already a couple of times. We've had a couple creatures that began not in the original three books, but in the Greyhawk supplement. We had one set that began not in the original three books, but in the Eldritch Wizardry supplement. And now we have one that's not in the original edition at all.
Nope.
It's not in any of those. It begins, and because of that, because it's not in original edition, it's not in Holmes Basic, it's not in the BX, Moldvay Cook Marsh series, it's not in BECME, which means it's not in the Rules Cyclopedia. So it's not, it doesn't make an appearance, at least in the rule books of the basic D&D. So this is the first time that we're actually starting out with a monster that began in first edition.
Nice.
So let's take a look at it. So
Uh,
that means we need to go over the very initial stats for it, and it's in first edition terminology. I will point out that the art it's in the first edition monster manual. It's on page 60, and the art is by David Trompier, which he has some really iconic pieces, okay, in this monster manual. Frequency is rare. Number appearing is 1 to 4, so they can be solitary or they usually come in groups. The armor class is 4, which is decent, not too horrible. It's not in the negatives, so that's okay. It has a really fast movement rate, okay? It has 6 plus 1 hit dice, 40% chance of being in lair, a decent treasure type, gets 1 attack, but the damage for that attack is 3d6. It's 3 to 18, okay? Also, it has a special thing where if it flees or retreats from combat, it can kick you as it's leaving.
so
It
it's sort of an
has...
opportunity attack, but in reverse.
Right,
It's, it's,
exactly.
it's a Parthian shot, if you will.
Yeah, yep. It has standard magic resistance, average intelligence. It is chaotic evil, and it is considered a large creature. It has no psionic ability. Okay, so those are the stats. First time we see them. Now let's talk about its description. It says, this weird creature haunts deserted and desolate places, for it is so ugly, most other creatures cannot bear the sight of it. The body of a Leucrotta resembles that of a stag, that is, in the deer family. An ungulate, basically, a four-legged, hoofed ungulate, okay? Its tail being rather lion-like, so now it's like a savanna lion,
Mhm.
and its legs end in cloven hooves. Its head is that of a huge badger, okay? But instead of teeth, it has sharp, jagged, bony ridges. This
Well,
monster is very... I know, that is rough. This monster is very sly and can imitate the voice of a man or woman. They will do this to trick prey to approach within attack distance. When retreating, the Leucrotta can kick backwards with both hooves, causing 1 to 6 hit points damage with each that hits. The monster speaks the language of its alignment as well as the common tongue.
uh, worth saying that a lot of what you just read uh, comes directly out of Pliny's Natural History. Uh,
Ah,
so,
funny that you should say that.
Yeah.
So let's actually take a look at that.
Yeah.
If we hop over
That is
to
the page I'm looking
Wikipedia,
at right there. That's the one.
if you hop over to Wikipedia, you see that it tells us that the Leucrotta actually is a mythical, it's based on, at least in D&D, it's based on a mythical dog wolf of India or Ethiopia, linked to the hyena and said to be a deadly enemy of men and dogs. It has several names: the crocotta, the corocotta, the crocuta, the Leucrotta. Okay, so it has this weird sort of amalgamation name. And there are two ancient accounts that we actually have a quote regarding this creature. There is Pliny the Elder, who in his natural history says, when crossed with this race of animals, he's talking about the hyena, the Ethiopian lioness gives birth to the corocotta, that mimics the voices of men and cattle in a similar way. It has an unbroken ridge of bone in each jaw, forming a continuous tooth without any gum. He also then, so that is the corocotta. He also then has another creature that he calls the Leucrotta, which he calls, quote, the swiftest of all beasts and about the size of an ass, that is, a donkey, right? With a stag's haunches, a lion's neck, the tail and breast, a lion's neck, tail, and breast, a badger's head, the cloven hooves, a mouth opening right back to the ears, that is, the split of the mouth goes all the way back to the back of the head, okay?
That's very
And
distressing.
yes, it is. And the ridges of bone in place of rows of teeth. This animal is reported to imitate the voices of human beings.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, I mean, I love the effort put into uh you know that Gary put into like copying a monster from the original monster manual.
Right. So there's one other a quote that I want to tell you about by a Byzantine scholar named Photius, who had his work summarized by a Greek author, Ctesias, okay? And he says this: in Ethiopia, there is an animal called a crocotus, vulgarly kainolikos, that's from the Greek, right? Which means dog wolf. And it is of amazing strength. It is said to imitate the human voice, to call men by name at night, and to devour those who approach it. It is as brave as a lion, as swift as a horse, and as strong as a bull. It cannot be overcome by any weapon of steel. The reason I bring that up is because notice what happens. The description there doesn't say its body has parts like a lion and it runs like a horse because it has the legs of a horse and it has huge muscles like a it describes it as if this is the action this thing is taking. It's as brave as a lion and as swift as a horse, so brave and fast. But that gets, we're talking about historical texts from a long time ago, and those things get sort of twisted and rolled, and it's like a big game of telephone, and you end up at the end with an entry that then gets taken by Gygax, and he says, hey, let's take this thing and make a D&D creature out of it.
I
And
can't
he
think why you
takes
wouldn't. I
it,
think that's great.
right, exactly. And he takes it and says, okay, we are going to then use this as the basis, and we're going to use those sort of descriptors as actual animal pieces when we describe this thing. Which is also what Pliny did, right? He said, no, it has those things. It has the body of a stag, but the tail of a lion, the mane of a lion, and, all that.
Look,
So,
look, every monster manual undergoes different like art changes and right,
right.
reimagines monsters. And so clearly Photius the Great
Hmm.
of Constantinople, ecumenical patriarch from 858 to 867
Right?
is just another designer trying to like get their own imagining and their own spin on this creature. Like they were handed it and like, okay, buddy, you've got 500 words, make something out of this.
Hmm.
And like
Right.
I feel for him, I've been
Yeah.
there. It's tough life as a
Yeah.
freelancing patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox
I
Church.
know. I mean, you're beholden to your patron. What can I say? So here's the thing. So the first edition monster manual is the first entry that we see here. And as we just mentioned, right, it actually is a creature that Gary devised and created stats for the game, but it's based on a real mythological creature. Okay. Before we go to the second edition Monstrous Manual, I want to point out three other instances where we see this animal, okay? The second instance that we see this is also in first edition D&D, but it's in the Monster Manual 2. In the Monster Manual 2, it highlights a demon lord named Kostchichi, okay? Kostchichi is a powerful demon lord that is one of those hated demon lords, right? He resembles a giant. He is a frost giant god, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is it says that describes him and whatnot, and then it says a pair of Leucrotta of the largest size. And then it gives special stats, AC 3, really high movement, 9 hit dice instead of the normal 6+1, and 8 to 18 damage instead of 3 to 18 damage. And the rear kicks do 1d6 plus 1 instead of just 1d6 each. So all that. But it says that these two huge Leucrotta serve as his constant guards and companions. So right away, sort of right after these creatures were created and put in the Monster Manual, they weren't sort of used a great deal in a bunch of modules. Instead, they got created and then they got made to be the companions and guard dogs for a demon lord.
And that's
Okay?
pretty cool.
Which is pretty cool. Which is pretty cool.
Like within their own design, they're one of those sort of odd wilderness trickery situations that
Mm-hmm.
you see
Mm-hmm.
sort of a lot of 1E monsters are sort of this is a wilderness encounter where you get
Mm-hmm.
tricked, right?
Right. Right.
And uh, they're doing sort of a lure you into danger thing, and in all fairness, uh, folklore is absolutely jam-packed with that kind of stuff.
Right. Right. Now, the other thing I want to point out, and we don't usually bring up Dragon Magazine articles, but this time I want to bring up a Dragon Magazine article because it's related to something that happens around third edition, okay? But I'm going to mention it now because it's important for thinking about this creature. So in Dragon number 91, which I think is from 1984, there is an article in here, The Ecology of the Leucrotta. And I'm going to tell you who wrote it. It's Ed Greenwood. And that is a hint regarding what happens to this creature because remember, this didn't come out of Gary's Greyhawk supplement. This came out of him doing research about mythical beasts and using some of those as inspiration to make creatures for his monster manual for first edition AD&D. But some of those monsters that are in there are directly from his Greyhawk setting, and so those monsters were published in the Greyhawk supplement for the OD&D. This never was. This was sort of a new cloth monster, right, in the first edition monster manual. And I think Ed Greenwood liked it a lot, or he got assigned this to, someone asked him to do this. I don't know which one. I don't know the lore regarding that specifically. But in any case, when he wrote this, and I think that Ed Greenwood really likes this creature, so what ends up happening is it starts being used in the Forgotten Realms. And by third edition,
Yep.
you see it in the Forgotten Realms Monstrous Manual companion or compendium, right? Not in the regular monster manual. So this
Second, right? You said third. Did you mean second?
in second edition it is in the actual monstrous manual. But by
Okay.
third edition, it's not in the regular monster manual, so you have to go to the Monsters of Faerun to see
Okay.
it.
I remember it
Okay.
being in my 93 monster manual. I don't have my book in front of me to check that,
Yep.
but I
Yep.
remember it being there.
It is in the
Uh,
monster. It was in the second three-hole punched packet of
yeah.
Monstrous Compendium, and then
Yep.
it's also in the actual published bound book of that Monstrous Compendium for second edition. But by third edition, it ends up getting smushed over to be a Forgotten Realms or Faerun specific creature and
Yeah.
not a
Okay.
generic creature. But I found that very interesting, right? Because it kind of makes sense if Ed Greenwood wrote this history, this ecology article, and really liked, the Leucrotta, then it makes sense he started using it, right?
Yeah.
and so I'm not going to read this article to you, but it is in the typical early '80s or mid '80s ecology article style for Dragon Magazine. It's only a couple of pages, but it has like this entry that is sort of a pseudo historic account from some sage, written from the sage's perspective, and then it has this huge set of appendices. Or in that one article that we looked at, it was a huge like set of footnotes and whatnot, and that's kind of what they do here. So right now we've had this in the 1E Monster Manual, and then the Monster Manual 2, it gets a mention in Kostici's entry, right? And then we have a number 91 ecology article about it, and then we don't hear anything else about it until we get to second edition. And in second edition, we get an official entry for the Leucrotta in the Monstrous Manual, and we learn that it is in broken terrain and temperate wastelands. It's rare still. It has pack organization. It is active day and night. It's a carnivore. It has average intelligence. It has same treasure type, same alignment, same number appearing, same armor class, same movement, same hit dice. Thaco is about the same. Number of attacks is 1. Damage. So this is basically the same exact stats that you get in the first edition Monstrous Manual. You get sort of almost more detailed picture because there's not. It's a little more clear because the art in the second edition Monstrous Manual was a little more formatted a little bit differently. And then of course, as all of the entries in the Monstrous Manual, it gets a whole page of ecology and combat notes and all that, right?
Yeah.
He keeps the same description though, basically.
Yeah. Like opening with a creature of ugly appearance. We're not looking at the same art. That thing looks awesome.
Right. Well, that's part of that is because of the ecology article by Ed Greenwood, because here's what he says. He says, this is the first paragraph. One of the ugliest and most cruel of all creatures is the Leucrotta, a loathsome carnivorous beast that inhabits wastelands in the wilderness. On its cloven hooves, it runs as fast as a medium-sized warhorse, and it savages prey with its jagged, bony jaws, rather as sharks do. Humans are its favorite prey, and the, quote, ugly killer is one of the most dangerous and most feared predators of the wastes because of its cunning and its strange talent for mimicry. So he gives it the moniker Ugly Killer, and that stays with it in all future editions.
I mean, that's very judgy for someone who's really doing their best, and they've worked on their figure, and they just don't have a personality, just an absolute personality.
My Leucrotta is quite thick, okay? It's quite thick, but I'm telling you, right? Honey badger don't give a so,
That's right.
honey badgers it's a beautiful creature. Like, think about this, okay? It's got basically the body plan of a stag, okay?
Right.
And because of its hooves and its feet and leg structure, it can run as fast as a horse. And when it runs, because it has hooves, you can't tell whether it's actually a stag, a horse, or a Leucrotta.
Yep. Like it holds its head much more like a great cat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As we see in that picture.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't have sort of a more upright prey species head
Mm-hmm.
that has wider angle of vision. Has a
Right.
predator's forward vision, which is
Mm-hmm.
appropriate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're
Yep.
treating its basic pitch with some understanding, and I really like that a lot. Um, Also, I mean. If you don't already know that when presented with the possibility, deer will eat meat, I'm telling you now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
That's not for
Yeah.
Sam, who of course knows, but for
No,
the
no, no.
listener.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
They will, if they look, meat is actually a great source of salt, and all
yep,
animals need salt.
yep,
Okay. All mammals need salt. So if they are in need of salt, they will find it wherever they can get it. And protein is good for them too. They have a harder time digesting it, but they still can
yep.
in small amounts.
And then also in combat, like the C below in their special attacks is
Mm-hmm.
on an 18 or better, they ruin your gear. Like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
These things are these things are
Yeah.
terrible. Um,
Hmm. Well,
and
because think about
yeah,
this, right? Not to keep harping on the description, but okay, it has the body of a stag, a lion's tail, and cloven hooves, a huge badger head, and remember the teeth. It describes them as sharp, jagged, bony ridges. In other words, imagine you didn't have any teeth, okay,
hmm
but your jaw was sharp and jagged,
hmm
okay? And now you don't have teeth to rip and tear and cut meat like easily. Instead, this is like cutting something with a sharpened spoon,
yeah.
right? Which is very, very damaging to the tissue. Like, this is nasty.
Why a spoon, cousin? Why not an axe?
Well, so uh, also note that it's for the extra thing in the description here in the second edition is that its eyes glow with a feral red light.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the smell of animals decomposing on a hot, humid day follows the Leucrotta, and its breath is especially bad. And I think that he
Oh,
mentions that
interesting.
in the ecology article.
Yeah, he's like Ed is assigning them a bunch of additional sort of minor features
Mm-hmm.
to just kind of spice them up as
Right.
monsters, and those actually do get carried forward. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I mean it's very that second ed monster manual is very much adapting this article
Mm-hmm.
more than
Right.
any other
Yep.
like, approach.
Yeah, because folks, in the first edition monster manual, the entry is literally like 5 sentences. It's a single paragraph, right?
Uh,
It's not very much, right?
So, for example, like there's actually a lair action, and that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Those brave enough to venture into a Leucrotta lair must first roll a successful saving throw versus poison with a -1 penalty due to the horrendous stench, or gag helplessly for 1d4 rounds.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
so like, you don't see a ton of that in second ed. Not none, but it's not that common
Mm-hmm.
to
Right.
have kind
Yep.
of uh, saving throw to enter lair, as it were.
Yeah.
But like a lair action that dumps the poison condition on you uh, in your opening round in a region. I mean, that makes sense in 5e. That's very
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Mm-hmm.
perfectly cromulent idea.
Yep. It's interesting what it says. It says for its ecology, it says this is odd in ecology, right? It talks about how they distance themselves from the grand picture of nature, preferring to lurk on the fringes. Then it has this little nugget. They serve no practical use, and one would be hard pressed to find a druid that would try to protect a member of this species. Serving
Rude.
no practical use in ecology is not usually the direction that you go, right? Like that makes this such an outlier that it almost connects it right back to Kostichi, right?
hmm hmm
As if these have some kind of weird demonic origin and they escaped and they now have a natural material plane presence that doesn't really track with anything that was natural.
I mean, if you took the approach that Kashichi's Lucratas are, you know, the origin of a species that was never meant to escape containment, um,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's pretty cool,
Yeah,
frankly.
yeah, yeah. It says some sages speculate that the Leucrotta is an unnatural abnormality, an aberration spawned by some demented power or archmage. They always fall back on that whole wizard did it thing.
They really do.
Then it says, still, some mages prize the Leucrotta hide for creating boots of striding and springing, hoping that the sure-footedness of the beast passes down to the boots themselves. There are rumors that Leucrotta saliva is an effective antidote to love philters, but so far there have been no volunteers to test this theory. Doesn't that sound like something Ed Greenwood wrote?
I
That
think
is
that
totally Ed Greenwood
I think
sounding.
that some good Leucrotta lickens would certainly solve something, but it's probably your excess of hit points.
Yeah. All right, that's your monstrous manual. Yeah, you're right. It has like a layer action. It has its retreating kick. It has what I mentioned before. It says, note to trackers, it is almost impossible to identify Leucrotta tracks since they look exactly like a stag's. So this thing has stealth, which is why I think they put the glowing eyes and the stench on it,
Hmm.
because that's the way that you would detect it. That's how you would know that it's not a stag or a horse, that
Yeah.
it's a Leucrotta, right? So that's second edition. And then we get to third edition, and there is not a Leucrotta in any of the five monstrous manuals. I'll admit I did not check the Fiend Folio, and I didn't check the Abyssal, like the Fiends of the Abyss books, but there is an entry for the Leucrotta in the Monster Compendium Monsters of Faerun book.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what it says. First of all, it has new and different art, which makes it look. I don't know. Maybe it's the lack of background features that make it look smaller and more like dog-like. But I don't know if I'm looking at that correctly. Still has a very badger-like head. Still has the cloven hooves. Still has a lion-like tail. In third edition, it is a large magical beast. It has 6d10 hit dice, so 6d10 plus 24 hit points. Generic initiative of +1. Its speed is 50, which is okay. Its AC is 16. Let's see, what is the challenge rating for this creature? It's a CR4. So I don't know how good these stats are for a CR4 creature.
Yeah, so I mean, 57 hit points is very respectable at CR4, +9 to hit. Again, pretty respectable. Damage, okay, it's all right. The bone bite that gives it a ×3 damage critical hit, that's
Mm-hmm.
a much bigger deal, and we get the gear destruction effect.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically on a crit, it gets a free chance to sunder shield or armor, and so that's sort of a big deal. Then they have immunity to charm and then you get a bunch of lore. So they have the dodge feat, which is a huge pain in the ass, and no one who ran this monster ever remembered to use it. I'd bet cash money because the way the dodge feat works in third ed, you have to pick one enemy target. You have one extra point of AC against just them.
Mm,
Of
yeah,
course, no one noticed that.
right.
And then they have power attack. Again, I'm betting most GMs didn't go check the feats to see what they could do. That's
Mm-hmm.
the fundamental problem with just listing feats.
Right,
In their write-up. It's very easy to miss, but it's an
right.
option to trade attack bonus for damage, right?
So
And
let's look at the actual text here, what it
yep,
says. Although again, it's a solitary pair or pack, always chaotic evil. That advancement looks pretty standard.
yep.
It says Lucratas are the murderous bullies of the wilderness, cunning enough to hunt humans, but too smart to make a habit of it. Lucratas are hideously ugly. In theory, a creature with the body and legs of a 9-foot long stag, the tufted tail of a lion, and a low slung wedge shaped head like that of a giant badger could be handsome, or at least not repulsive. No such luck for the Leucrotta. Its glowing red eyes, foul, oily skin, nauseating stench, and incessant drooling bring about a deep sense of loathing in other creatures. Leucrottas live in desolate areas far from civilized beings who would happily kill them, but near to hunting grounds. Leucrottas will eat humanoids, but prefer non-intelligent prey that will not have relatives looking for vengeance. Thanks to their own sadistic tendencies, Leucrottas tend to kill the wildlife in an area far faster than they can consume it. Only fully evil carrion eaters will touch a creature slain by a Leucrotta, so most such kills simply rot, skirted widely by all natural animals. Leucrottas carry their obsession with slaying other creatures to ridiculous extremes. When well fed, they spend their time inventing killing games or catching birds on the wing by springing upon them from rocks. Druids and rangers, even evil ones, loathe Leucrotta for their willful devastation of all other creatures. Leucrotta speak Common, Draconic, and Giant. They also have an uncanny ability to mimic voices. One of the Leucrotta's favorite tricks is to replay the voices of its victims, particularly those that it managed to keep alive for a long time. How horribly evil. Ugh.
Yep. Yep. They
And then they
are
have,
super jerks.
yeah, Bone Bite, which you mentioned earlier, which gives them it just says their mouth contains sharp ridges of super hard bone. I think it's later on referred to as adamantine, as strong as adamantine or something.
Mm.
It says a critical hit gives ×3. That, as you said, there's a save to save their equipment. They're immune to charm.
And compulsion.
Yep, you mentioned that. And then it gives a whole In the Realms section because, of course, this is the Monsters of Faerun guide. And so I don't know if there's anything in there that's interesting in terms of,
I
it
mean,
just tells where they're found, basically.
proposing that people in the realms use Leucrotta as a swear word is sort of cutesy, but okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like very Realmsian kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing
Mm-hmm.
there to try to
Yeah.
create adventurer slang, and
Yeah.
one that's definitely a bit of a stretch.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know. Are you ready to move on?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when we move to fourth edition, we find out we get no fourth edition version of the Leucrotta, which is quite a shame. However, in the transitional time between fourth edition and fifth edition, they created an adventure for D&D Next called Dead in Thay. And Dead in Thay has a Leucrotta nest in it. So we get some early D&D Next stats and description of Leucrotta. Now, I'm only bringing this up because then we can compare it to the what ends up actually being published in 5th edition. But just so we can see sort of what it looks like, it's a large monstrosity. It's chaotic evil. It has a low AC, well, a mid-range AC of 13. It has 45 hit points, 6d10 hit dice plus 12. Decent speed, okay stats. It has the following kind of traits. False tracks. It takes a successful DC 20 intelligence nature check to tell a Leucrotta's tracks from those of a large deer. It has keen smell, and it has mimicry. The Leucrotta can mimic sounds it has heard, such as a person crying out in pain. A creature that hears the sounds can tell they are imitations with a successful DC 15 wisdom perception check. It has a bite, and its bites, if it scores a critical, it rolls damage dice 3 times instead of twice, so that carries on from the 3rd edition entry.
Yep.
Has a hoof attack. Has a kicking retreat. Whenever the Leucrotta takes the disengage action, it can take a bonus action to make a hoof attack before moving. A Leucrotta stands 7 feet tall at the shoulder, and its tan body, which gradually darkens to black at the head, can be up to 9 feet long. The creature's body resembles that of a muscular deer. It has a tufted tail and cloven hooves, and its head is like that of a badger. Instead of teeth, the Leucrotta has several serrated bone ridges, and the monster's eyes glow with red light when it's fighting. The smell of death hangs in the air around a Leucrotta, and its breath is especially foul. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
that tracks.
yeah, that's about right. Interesting absence from this is the existence of a CR line.
Right.
They haven't stabilized
Yeah, they
what
had
challenge
not
ratings are yet.
yeah, they hadn't figured that out yet. And here's
Yeah.
they live in an area resembling a tranquil meadow dotted with a few trees. It says, 4 Leucrottas lurk here among the trees, along with 1 young Leucrotta. They make calls like pained animals, which their handlers normally ignore. The creatures gleefully attack anyone they trick. It's this whole 4 of them plus 1 young, that actually comes from that previous entry,
Yep.
which says that if you find them in their lair, is it in here or is it? It might be in the 2E. Yeah, it's in the second ed thing. If you find them in their lair, there's a 10% chance that there's an extra one for every 4 that you have, and that extra one is like an immature one. So it's interesting that they carried that through all the way to the D&D Next update, but they only mentioned it in the lair entry of the. I mean, it's Dead in Thay, so it's in a big dungeon, and there's a whole area there with a bunch of different areas to interact with. But so that's that.
Yeah.
And then we go to fifth edition. So this is D&D Next, not quite fifth edition. When we get to fifth edition, you'll notice in the monster manual there is no Leucrotta entry. So
Ah.
we have to wait until we get to Volo's Guide to Monsters
Mhm, mhm,
before we
mhm.
see a Leucrotta.
Justice.
Um, yeah. And this is what we get. So
Spawn
let's
of
take a look at
Yinogu. What a
yeah.
choice.
If we look at the stat block first, you can talk about that if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, boy, let's start with that art. They finally actually
Hmm.
committed to making it
A
like
badger.
so ugly it's hard to look
Yeah.
at.
Right. Yes. Yeah, it is very much more ugly in this art than it is in the other ones. It's kind of tall and lithe, and it looks like a graceful creature with kind of a what the hell happened to its head, but like
Yeah.
that's, but not ugly. But now it's ugly.
Now its face is like distressing
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
a like uh in just a I'm not sure what I'm even seeing, and sort of so its shoulder musculature is kind of really jacked up.
Hmm.
Um, but the AC has gone up 1 point from that D&D Next version.
Hmm.
It's picked up a few more hit points. It's picked up a few more ability score points. Picked up the deception skill, which is nice. It's gonna want that. It speaks abyssal and null, but not common. So
Right. That's
that's
weird.
not
Yeah.
a great idea, but okay, fine.
Hmm.
Um, CR3. Um, It still has kicking retreat, which is designed to work the same way, and I think that design is a little odd. Um, well, no, actually, sorry, they've inverted it. If the
Hmm.
Leucrotta attacks with its hooves, it can disengage as a bonus action.
Right.
That's a much cleaner design
Hmm. Hmm.
in like
Yeah.
real
In
flow of
fifth
action
edition. Yeah.
terms. Yeah, I like that a lot. Um, and then mimicry is cool. And then Rampage. When Leucrotta reduces a creature to 0 hit points with melee attack on its turn, you take a bonus action to move up to half its speed and make an attack with its hooves. And uh,
So the thing
that,
is, that's very stag-like because that's what a stag would do if it was like protecting its young or something.
yeah, but
Um,
that's also very much what berserkers do. And like,
hmm. Right.
I think there's some knoll stat blocks that do that. So that's part of
Right.
why it's getting connected to Yinogo and the Knolls.
Hmm.
Which would
Hmm.
be an amazing band name. I just need to point that out. Um,
Right.
and then you've got a multi-attack, one bite, one hooves attack, hooves plural, as a single attack. Um, and it does still do triple damage on a crit,
Hmm. Which
um,
is nice.
which is nice. It's not
Yeah.
going to come up very often at all,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
5% of
Yep.
the time.
Right.
Um,
Now, if you run into four of them plus a young one,
yeah,
you might,
yeah.
you might experience it once. Yeah.
Sure, increase your chances. Dealing 3d8 plus 4,
Hmm.
so averaging 17 damage.
Right.
Uh,
For CR for
that
challenge three,
that's pretty
that's
good.
pretty good. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then the hooves also deal pretty respectable damage.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and the +6 to hit is quite good for CR3.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you my problem with this art.
Yeah.
The legs look more like they don't look like stag legs to me.
Mm.
The hooves, yes, but the legs themselves look more like pig legs.
Okay.
Um, so it's kind of a weird, like it's just a weird thing with the art. And again, here's a piece of art that's just showing the creature with no sort of background
Right.
material. So you can't get a sense of the size. I think that might help me sort of see these more as stag legs again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's neither here nor there. So let's look
Yep.
at the lore here. To see why it does this Yinagu thing, because remember it was related to Koschiki before,
Yep.
so that this is kind of a big change here lore wise, right?
I mean, considering that we didn't quite skip lore in third ed, but stayed fairly light and
Hmm.
totally ducked the Koshichi um,
Right. Yeah.
connection.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Well,
I
that's
don't
why I
actually
said,
know
that's
if
why I
it ever
mentioned
showed up in
I
Koshichi's
didn't,
write-up, but I doubt it.
right. We can check, but
Yeah,
let's table that for a second.
yeah,
So here's what it says. It says Leucrotta is what you would get if you took the head of a giant badger, the brain of a person who likes to torture and eat people, the legs of a deer, and the body of a large hyena, put them together and reanimated them with demon ichor without bothering to cover up the stink of death. That's a pretty nasty description, right?
yep,
Spawn of Yeenoghu. The first Leucrottas came into being alongside the gnolls during Yeenoghu's rampages on the material plane. Some of the hyenas that ate Yeenoghu's kills went through different transformations rather than turning into gnolls. Among these bizarre results, Leucrottas were the most numerous. As clever as it is cruel, a Leucrotta loves to deceive, torture, and kill. Because Leucrottas are smarter and tougher than most gnolls, one could occupy an elevated position within a gnoll tribe. Although a Leucrotta is unlikely to lead a group of gnolls, it can influence the leader, and it might even agree to carry a leader into battle and offer advice during the fight. Gnolls see Leucrottas as a form of entertainment, partly because a Leucrotta can mimic the squeals of a suffering victim, a sound that always gives gnolls pleasure, even when no victims are to be had. Further, a gnoll is bloodthirsty and sadistic, but unable by its nature to prolong the fun of killing. Most Leucrottas are consciously cruel, to the point of being meticulous about their savagery to draw out a kill into better and longer sport. Gnolls enjoy watching a Leucrotta work almost as much as they like doing their own killing. So they are really strongly connecting these to Knowles and Yeenoghu. I mean, that's a
yeah,
real strong connection there.
yeah. I think it's interesting to pick something more than just natural hyenas
Hmm.
to connect to gnolls and sort of gnoll culture, and to use these as your as sort of a gnolls MP3 player is pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah. It continues, foulness embodied. The Leucrotta is so loathsome that only gnolls and others of its kind can stand to be around one for long. Its horrific hodgepodge body oozes a foul stench that pollutes anywhere the creature lairs. This reek is outdone only by the creature's breath, which issues from a maw that drips fluid corrupted with rot and digestive juices. In place of fangs, a Leucrotta has bony ridges as hard as steel that can crush bones and lacerate flesh. These plates are so tough that a Leucrotta can use them to peel plate armor away from the body of a slain knight. A Leucrotta stench would normally warn away prey long before the creature could attack. It has two natural capabilities, however, that give it an advantage. First, a Leucrotta's tracks are nearly impossible to distinguish from those of common deer. Second, it can duplicate the call or the vocal expressions of just about any creature it has heard. The monster uses its mimicry to lure in potential victims, then attacks when they are confused or unaware of the actual threat. Ugh.
Yeah,
That is rough.
yeah. And of course, the other thing that I like about the Knoll connection is just that it introduces more options for pairings, right?
Yep.
For
Yep.
encounter construction.
Hmm.
Because like one of I think the early lessons of good game running needs to be that, you know, almost any two contrasting types of monsters are a more interesting encounter than more of the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think anybody can pretty much agree with that. The other thing that happens is I believe that they actually reprinted Leucrotta in Mordenkainen's Guide to Multiverse.
Uh-huh.
So same art.
Yeah, same art. That's very common
Hmm.
throughout Monsters of the Multiverse. They were very much about updating stat blocks rather than reissuing art for that book. But no change to armor class and hit points. 50-foot speed is very, very good. I mean, that 50-foot speed is good fairly late into the game. It's pretty incredible at CR3.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what it was in the Volo's
yeah,
Guide too.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And I think that this is the first time we've seen creature stat block stats for stench.
Mm. Yep. You
Um,
might be right.
Now, you're going to see that they've pivoted away from keen senses as a trait.
Hmm.
Uh, so instead, it has expertise and perception.
Okay.
right? So
Yep.
it has
Yep.
only a +1 bonus to wisdom, but a +5 to perception. That's expertise. And then stench works sort of like the troglodyte trait. If you start your turn within 5 feet of Leucrotta, you have to pass a DC 12 con save or be poisoned until the start of the creature's next turn. And then you become immune once you pass.
Nice.
Immune for 1 hour if you pass. And then still does the multi-attack, bite and hooves totally unchanged. And then kicking retreat is still a bonus action disengage after making an attack with the hooves. Doesn't have to hit, just has to make the attack. So so yeah, the stench trait is the big meaningful change here.
Yeah. Interesting.
Um, but it just is going to be white punishing for a good number of melee builds.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
your sort of rogue melee rogues are going to be in some of the worst position for that one, just because they're not going to be con proficient.
Right.
Rangers too, actually. Though you can, if your ranger doesn't have a good con, I'm sorry, buddy, you did it wrong.
Now, is there an entry in the 2024 Monster Manual?
There is not.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I was wondering if there was going to be, since there wasn't one in the initial 2014.
Right. And there's a couple of things that got cut that intentionally didn't get updated.
Hmm.
So they intentionally didn't update the drow stat blocks, right?
Right.
Because drow aren't monsters anymore. Drow get to be people. And there's a number of additional stat blocks, that kind of thing, but they're just never going to be sort of high enough priority to make the cut of the very ruthless page count limits
Hmm.
of the monster manual. Now,
Right.
when I describe a ruthless page count limit for 384 pages, you just have to understand there's a lot of stuff they can't not include, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's with all of our commentary about wishing there were more lore on every page and so on.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm. Yep.
but the 2024 Monster Manual is a very sort of densely packed book. Anyway, there's some format things in Monsters of the Multiverse that look like 2014, but still have the fundamental design principles of 2024. So
Okay.
it's a transitional text,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Very
Hmm.
intentionally, it's a transitional text.
Right.
But like the way Stench is written would look different in a 2024 format that they
Hmm.
hadn't shifted all the way to yet. And the same for bite and hooves. That would say melee attack roll rather than melee weapon attack. That
Right.
kind of thing.
Right.
But that's very, very finicky. Probably the math would not change in any of this. Because
Right.
I think there are a bunch of math updates that happened basically between 2014 and the moment of Monsters of the Multiverse. But you can see that in the addition of the stench trait that cost something in their overall math. It's just that if it didn't change any of their defense or damage math, then it's just a straight power up because they decided their old math was not sort of juiced enough.
Right. Interesting. I have two things to say before I ask you for your final thoughts.
Yeah, go.
Okay. The first one is that there is a Kostichi entry in Fiendish Codex 1, Hordes of the Abyss, which is a third edition book, but it does not bring forward the idea from the Monster Manual 2 in first edition that discusses Leucrotta in any way as companions to Kostichi.
Slap in the face from the devs.
I know,
Invalid.
because there is not a mention of Leucrotta in this book at all,
Yeah, yeah.
and the Prince of Wrath's entry, that's Kostrichi, does not include them. So that's too bad.
Yeah.
The second thing I wanted to mention was that while there was no basic D&D entry, because there was a 1E Monster Manual entry, some retro clones have entries for the Leucrotta. And so I will bring up the Old School Essentials retro clone.
Oh, nice.
And Old School Essentials has two versions. It has the classic version, which is more like BX basic D&D, and it has the advanced version, which is like BX but with the addition of some first edition creatures and some first edition class race combinations. Okay. And so if you look in the monster book for the advanced version of Old School Essentials, you find the Leucrotta. And the Leucrotta is this. It says, weird monsters with a stag-like body, a lion-like tail, and a badger-like head. Have jagged ridges of bone in place of teeth. Dwell in ruins and desolate wilds. It has a decent AC. These stats are basically right out of the first edition Monster Manual. It has two traits. It has mimicry. It can mimic human voices to lure prey to approach, and it speaks common. And the second one is called retreat attack. If retreating from melee, it can make a kick attack, which inflicts 1d6 damage on a successful attack. So it's basically just the port of the 1e info into the Old School Essentials retro clone. So just as a side note, right, it's not actually the Leucrotta is not actually in the basic version of D&D, but it got brought into the retro clones that have incorporated some of the 1e material. So there you have it. So this is probably the creature on our list that has the fewest entries. It has an official entry in the 1e Monster Manual, an official entry in the 2e Monster Manual, an official entry in the Monsters Compendium Monsters of Faerun 3rd edition book, and it has an official entry in the Volo's Guide to Monsters and the Monsters of the Multiverse
Well,
in 5th edition.
day 12 is going to give it a run for that record pretty hard.
Well, yeah, maybe. We'll see. I did not do an exhaustive, intensive search to find out what adventure modules this has been used in. I'm sure there are some. I know for a fact there are some. I only brought up Dead and Thay because it's that bridge between 4th and 5th edition, and
Yeah,
there
that's
is no
right.
4th edition entry. So yeah, interesting. So what are your final thoughts?
I mean, I know that the the visual aesthetic of the creature from, I'm gonna guess, the second ed era is a big part of what my wife likes about it so much, but also just the kind of interesting combination of things and sort of the weird folklore of it is going to be, I think, a big part of what she likes about
Mhm.
it. And it does appeal to me too. It is not a creature I've staged in any sense since maybe once or twice in second edition. So, I mean, probably a solid 30 years since I've fielded one of these guys. Uh,
Yeah.
but I do think that they're an interesting uh, inclusion, and I think that the the new 5e art really does like deliver the concept a lot more, even if it makes them sort of less. I mean, the goal is to make them less appealing in a real sense, right? And so much of that second ed art in particular was, I know you say it's ugly, but it's kind of amazing.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a disconnect between the sort of ugliness in the description and the ugliness in the demeanor of the creature and the
Right.
art.
Yeah.
The art in first edition wasn't horribly ugly.
Right.
It looked like a tall dog with weird feet. Like that's really like that's what the art looks like. Now once you read the description and you could see, oh yeah, it has these elements and these elements and these elements. But on a glance, it just looks like a dog-bodied creature, right?
Right.
Sort of the same in the dragon ecology article art. Now, the 2e monstrous manual art actually makes the creature look very, and this is where the conflict comes in. It looks very naturalistic, right?
Yep.
It looks very, oh, it's just kind of a weird deer-bodied thing with a weird head and a weird tail. But it's not ugly. It's just different,
I
right?
mean, it's dignified, right?
Right. It's very and it's sort of like you know what actually makes me think of the owlbear, right? How we talked about how
Yeah.
the owlbear, the reason why it's iconic is because it's kind of this sort of real weird naturalistic creature, right? And when you look at it, you can be like, oh yeah, it looks kind of like a bear, but it has like a weird bird head thing. But it doesn't look actually horrible, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
look, I mean, I wouldn't want to meet one in a forest, don't get me wrong, but you know what I'm saying. Same with the Leucrotta, right? The images of it don't match the ugly, violent, dangerous demeanor. And the thing about, hunting creatures just to kill them, not because it's hungry is real. That's that and that sort of that actually sort of goes to the, serving no practical use in the ecology, right?
Yeah. Like both. So to me, both the second ed and third ed art sort of says, yeah, you could slot these in for the hyenas in Disney's The Lion King,
Right.
and it would be, well, that's a weird looking thing, but oh yeah, okay, that feels like it fits this space, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and it fits the narrative that Disney's constructing for those hyenas
Hmm.
really specifically, which is kind of interesting. Like in a sense, if you need something that is more definitely a monster but fits the stories people tell about hyenas, I
Hmm.
mean, Leucrotta's your guy.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I had a lot of fun looking up this creature because I didn't know a ton about it. I mean, obviously, of course, I've heard of it and I've seen it. I don't think I've ever used one.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have sort of a really specific like whole adventure that's showcasing it,
Hmm.
it's really only going to come up on a wilderness encounter table. And because we've gone over the specific books where those are showing up, either you've customized it into the table or that table was written for that secondary book. Like that's just the price of not being in monster manuals and instead
Right.
being in compendiums and appendices and addenda.
Hmm.
I mean, Dead and Thay is very much sort of a funhouse situation
Hmm.
in that it goes through a bunch of different biomes in a
Right.
way that isn't trying to be real. The
This
goal is a
right.
constructed
This,
space, right?
yeah, this area right here, right at number 57 is where the Leucrotta are.
Yep, yep, yep. And they will eat you with Heinz 57 too. That is
Yes, they will.
what I expect.
Yes, 57 is a very good number for them.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's really funny because usually the art isn't in conflict in my brain, right?
yeah,
With with the creature, right? And even if you go back to that Wikipedia page and you look at the sort of ancient medieval art, right? It also is kind of cute,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Well, like
mean,
some of them are just sort of a little bit derpy. Sorry,
yeah,
buddy.
no, they are. It's very interesting. I also found this very interesting to look at the evolution of the development of this creature as going from, first edition into second, and then into a Dragon Magazine ecology article, and then into second, and then into third edition, but more focused on the realms
Yeah,
and how that sort of happened is pretty interesting, just in terms of the typical iconic monsters are they tend to be, either from, the very earliest, right? Now, no shade on Ed Greenwood because he's, of course, a huge name in the industry and everything and a huge name in D&D, but like he didn't produce anything for original edition that in the original pamphlet books, right? Now he did
mhm,
write for Dragon Magazine very early. So, but a lot of the what people think of as the iconic creatures and the iconic adventures are from those very early days. And while this was in the 1E Monster Manual, it's not really associated with anything before that. So, very interesting. Very
yeah,
interesting and again, it's a creature whose stats stay very similar overall. And what changes more is the expansion of the lore around it.
yeah. So thank you very much for going along with the inclusion of this sort of sort of unusual fella.
No,
And
I like it.
yeah, I've enjoyed this discussion. Anything else you want to cover here?
Well, I think that what this is actually telling me is that you need to put more Leucrotta in your adventure to make Rabbit happy.
I think that not only that, I need to add in more gear destruction because
Yes,
that will be
I
very
bet that
popular
would
with
make
all
her
my
really
players
happy. Yeah.
for sure. For sure.
I mean, it gets a
She has
save.
armor that's way overpowered,
Look,
and I can't
look.
wait to eat that stuff.
It gets a save. If it scores a hit against someone with a shield or armor, the target must roll a saving throw
Yeah,
versus a crushing
yeah,
blow.
yeah,
Look,
yeah,
it could save.
yeah.
It could save.
Yeah, her fighter's best item, and it's not especially close, is her armor. It's one of the best items in the whole game. It's
Yeah,
completely
nice.
absurd.
Very cool.
So
Well,
just, I'm coming for it.
yeah. And with the Lucrata, that'll just take the cake. There you go.
Oh yeah.
Well, folks, again, a little bit of a shorter episode for us, right? Not a short episode, but a short episode for us.
Perish the thought.
I think the Owlbear episode was pretty short too. But anyway, and so we hope you're enjoying it. Brandis, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Blue Sky at brandisstoddard.bsky.social. You can find me on the Tome Show Discord. My personal blog is brandisstoddard.com, and my Patreon is Brandis Stoddard. How about you, Sam?
You can find me on rpgmusings.com as well as on the Tome Show Discord, and I am DM Samuel on all the socials. So ping me and I'll get back to you. And with that, I think we have made an excellent episode about a very dastardly creature, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.